Hello and welcome back to another video. Today we're looking at the third division of English football, League One. Now I know a lot of people will either play in the Premier League, the Championship, so you're only one promotion away, or League Two so that you have the full road to glory. But today we're actually looking at the third division because I think it has four of the most interesting teams in England in it. So even if you're not planning on doing a save in this league, maybe you could move one of these teams to either the Championship for a more difficult save or League Two for a full road to glory. Anyway, first of all, we're going to be beginning with the realistic rules and how to play in the league, and at the end of the video, we're going to go through the four teams that I recommend you have a look at. So as always, let's start with the squad rules. The rules in League One have actually changed quite a bit recently. Last season, you were allowed 22 players, where 8 of them must be homegrown, which means playing for the team for up to 3 years before they turn 21. Whereas this year, you're only allowed 20 players, of which 8 of them must be homegrown. So that's nearly half the squad has to be English or have played in the English league for 3 years before they turn 21. If you're going to follow these rules, then a good thing for you to know is that under 21 players don't actually count towards this rule. So you can have 20 players over the age of 21 and another 20 under the age of 21, and that's perfectly fine. Of course, this is an extreme example and never would happen, but this does actually help you out where you can have 5 or 6 under 21s in your squad that you can just use whenever you need them. You're probably going to be getting these young players from your youth academy. Now, of course, you're going to be scouting England, where a ton of players come from in this league, but you've also got Ireland and Wales, and of course Scotland that make up a vast majority of the league as well. 520 players are from England, and then you've got 46 from Ireland, 40 from Wales, and 37 from Scotland. Lower down this list, you have 22 from Northern Ireland and 9 are from Australia, so if you want a more exotic player, potentially you could youth scout Australia. However, I would recommend going for England, Scotland, and then one of Wales and Ireland, especially now you can finally scout Wales on FIFA 22. To make it a bit harder, try and limit your player ratings to, if you're in the playoffs, 68, if you're in the mid-table region, 66 overall players, and if you're in the bottom half or maybe relegation zone, limit your players to 64 overall. This is just for signings. Of course, some of your players will develop over this, and at that point it's up to you if you think it's realistic for them to stay. Maybe they're older, so they would want to stay with the club, or maybe they're younger and they would actually prefer to be playing in the Championship, so you should let them go. It's totally up to you, but that's what I'd limit the player ratings to. With Hull being promoted out of League One, this year there's actually only 2 teams that have stadiums in the game, Sunderland and Portsmouth. The 2 stadiums are very different, with Fratton Park being a more traditional lower league ground with a capacity of around 25,000 people, and the Stadium of Light being a modern big ground with about 50,000 seats. Sunderland haven't sold it out for 6 years since they were last in the Premier League, so it's not ever going to be full in League One, but the game doesn't realise this and does give you the full capacity, so you do actually get a ton of money from having the Stadium of Light. In terms of signings, if you're not going to be one of the 4 teams that I'm going to go into in a second, then you should be aiming to sign either past it Championship players, so these are older players from the Championship, young high potential Scottish and Irish players, because we do get a lot of talent coming in from these nations to try and prove themselves so they can get a position higher up the tiers, so maybe coming into your bottom of League One team so that they can prove they're good and then eventually head up to the Championship or the Premier League like a couple of players have done in the past. And you're also going to want to focus on Premier League and Championship loans. You can see how good this was for Lincoln last season, where they had Brennan Johnson from Forest, who was a very good player for them, and Morgan Rogers from Man City, who again, both of them on the wing, really did help them nearly get promoted, and they failed in the playoffs. So that's the general rules to how to play any team in League One. So it's time to go in depth into these 4 teams that I've been teasing throughout the video. The first one is Crewe Alexandra. Now, a lot of people will know Crewe Alexandra for their academy, and that's exactly why I think they're such an interesting team. They were managed by Dario Gradi from 1983 until 2011, before he stepped down just to look after their youth academy. He had a big interest in the Crewe Alexandra Academy being successful because part of his managerial contract was a clause that gave him a percentage of any player's profit when they were sold to another club. Apparently this was around 20 to 25%. So if a player from their youth academy was sold for £1 million, he would get £250,000 directly in his bank account. So he definitely had a massive interest in keeping the production belt going at Crewe Alexandra. And that's going to be your job if you try and take over Crewe. Of course, you can pretend Dario Gradi is still there looking after your youth scouts and your youth academy, and you can just focus on getting really good youth players coming through. Gradi also had a really good eye for talent, not just in youth players, but in signing young and cheap players with high potential. Some of the former Crewe Alexandra Youth Academy players include Ashley Westwood, who played for Burnley, Billy Jones from Sunderland, Dean Ashton, who was an England international, David Vaughan, who played for Blackpool in the Premier League and Wales, Neil Lennon, of course, Leicester and Celtic player, Danny Murphy, who you probably know more as a pundit these days, and David Platt, who was an ex-England captain. So this is a massive roll of honour, a Hall of Fame almost, of the Crewe Alexandra Academy. They did also like to pick up youth rejects like Robbie Savage, who left Manchester United in the early 90s, joined Crewe, played for 2 seasons, and then got sold on for a massive amount of money. So again, you need to focus on doing this kind of thing, and that's why I think Crewe Alexandra are such a fun career mode save. Moving on to the second team, and it's Lincoln City. So a couple of seasons ago, they found themselves in the 5th division. They had a couple of good FA Cup runs, you probably know them, and they find themselves in the 3rd division. They played against the likes of Arsenal, they beat Burnley. It was a really good time for the city. As I mentioned earlier in the video, they did actually find themselves top of the league quite a bit last season. Unfortunately, their form dipped towards the end of the season. They found themselves in the playoffs and then eventually lost in the playoff final. This year on FIFA, their team isn't anywhere near as good, but they do still have some decent talent. They've got some good potential in Monsma, Sorensen, Scully and Undululu, and a couple of young players who could really be good like Lewis Fiorini from Scotland. While they might not have any big names or a real stadium, I really do think they are a team on the rise. They're the only big team in Lincolnshire themselves. Scunthorpe are also on the game and find themselves in Lincolnshire, and Grimsby were up until a couple of seasons ago, but Scunthorpe are currently the worst team in League 2 according to FIFA, and Grimsby find themselves not even in the game. This basically gives Lincoln City an entire county of around 1 million people to try and impress and try and get up the leagues. There's definitely been smaller counties to do this in the past, but I do think they're an interesting challenge. They have a very young team as well, with an average age of 22.7, which is very good for the league. They have quite a bit of domestic prestige of 7, which again is high for this league. They have a small transfer budget, so it's going to be difficult. And they do like to play a slow possession build-up, which is more similar to that you'd find higher up the leagues. The manager Michael Appleton really does enforce this, so if you do take over Lincoln, I would try and recommend you do play this slow passing game that Lincoln City love to play. So the 4th team on my list is former Premier League regulars Sunderland. Now they find themselves 4th at the minute, which is in the playoffs, and that's a pretty good start for them so far. They still have the biggest budget in the league, but this year they actually have competition for that name, because Sheffield Wednesday currently also have a €5 million transfer budget and a better squad. However, Sunderland do have some very good talent. Callum Doyle at centre-back and Ron Thorben Hoffman in goal have tons of potential, and Leon Dijaku also could be really good and almost Premier League level. Of course, their big rivals are Newcastle United, and with their big takeover, it's looking likely that Sunderland might not be the biggest team in the North East ever again. That's up to you to change. Now they'll have to get back to the Premier League first, of course, and that'll give Newcastle 2 or 3 seasons of big spending. It's up to you if you can overtake them, possibly going their total other way, skipping the big names, big signings, and going for youth academy only. Their squad's quite a bit older than the likes of Lincoln and Crewe, with an average age of 25.2, so people like McGeady, who's their best player, 5-star skills of course, are going to have to try and drag them to the league before his 35-year-old body totally gives up and he loses any more of his 70 sprint speed. Finally, the last team we're going to look at in League One is Burton Albion. So Burton actually have the smallest fan base in any of the top 4 divisions. Even teams like Sutton and Barrow, who were in old FIFAs, have bigger fan bases than Burton. This is despite Burton actually being in the Championship at the start of last decade. So in the last 12 years, they've actually played in the Championship, League 1, League 2 and the Conference Premier League. So this has been quite a rise to power for such a small place in Derbyshire. They currently train at England's training facilities, St George's Park, and they do have good potential for League One, with over 10 players having over 70 potential. If you can properly develop these young players, they do definitely have potential to get back to the Championship, and who knows, maybe take over Derby County as the biggest team in the county. Their almost entire team is from the UK or Ireland, with only 1 or 2 players playing for other nationalities. Last year, they had a very old team, with 7 of their first 11 being over 30 years old. This year, they only have Lucas Akins, Michael Bostwick, and John Brayford over 30. Even their goalkeeper Ben Garrett, who used to be the worst player on FIFA, is actually only 27. So they do have some pretty young players in there, the likes of Tom Hamer, Charlie Lakin, Johnny Smith, Joe Powell, all very good players, but the pick of the bunch for potential is actually Terry Taylor. With famous striker Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank being the manager, maybe it's time to bring Burton back up the leagues. With the training facilities they have, there's no reason why you can't go for a full youth academy save, try and develop them in-house and save a lot of money. Hopefully that's a good challenge for you guys, and hopefully you enjoy using Burton and their famous yellow and black kits. So that's all we have for today's video. Hopefully you've learned a little bit more about League 2 or some of these teams, because I do know a lot of people only really touch Sunderland and maybe Sheffield Wednesday this year. Hopefully you give one of these smaller teams a go, try and bring them up to glory rather than taking someone else who's already experienced it back to where they think they belong. Anyway, if you support a League 1 team, please do let me know in the comments. I'd love to see where you guys are from and who you support. If you want to talk to me about League 1, join the Discord or message me on Twitter. I'm always happy to respond to anyone who messages me. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and hopefully you'll give it a like if you enjoyed it. Thank you all for watching. See you very soon for another team or league guide on the Geografifa channel very soon. Cheers.